He's on the ground, his body is shaking. The crowd is screaming, but he can barely hear them. This is what triumph looks like. 2 sets down, match point against him. And somehow, he clawed his way back. Alexander Zverev on the other side of the net. A 4-hour war. The kind of match that breaks athletes. And when it ended, when he finally won his first Grand Slam at the US Open in 2020, Dominic Thiem didn't feel relief. He felt nothing. Well, not nothing. He felt empty. 3 weeks later, he would describe it himself, the depression, the hollow sensation of reaching the peak and finding silence. "I thought everything would change," he'd say later, but it didn't. And then, less than a year later, his body gave up, not from exhaustion, not from age, from something more fundamental. The same power that carried him to the top of the world was the thing that destroyed him. This is the story of what happens when you sacrifice everything for a dream, and the dream doesn't save you. Dominic Thiem was born into tennis. His parents were coaches. He was holding a racket at 4 years old. The clay courts of Austria became his second home. But talent isn't enough. It never is. By the time he was 14, the costs were mounting, $80,000 to $100,000 a year. Training camps, travel, tournaments. His family didn't have that kind of money. So someone made a decision. His grandmother. She sold her apartment, her home, to fund the career of a teenager who hadn't won anything yet. Thiem would later admit the weight of that sacrifice. "It was obviously an incredible amount of money to invest in my career," he said. "It created enormous pressure. Not the pressure to win, the pressure to make it worth it. Because if you fail, you're not just losing your own dream. You're erasing someone else's sacrifice." His family found investors, small stakeholders who would give him money in exchange for a percentage of his future earnings. $80,000 a year, handed to a teenager, with the understanding that if he made it, he'd pay them back. And if he didn't, that debt would follow him forever. Some athletes are driven by passion, some by ego. Dominic Thiem was driven by something heavier, obligation. He wasn't just playing for himself. He was carrying the financial future of everyone who believed in him. And that weight never leaves, even when you win. This is where it begins, not with glory, with debt. Tennis isn't a sport for dreamers, it's a sport for the rich. Thiem said it himself. The barrier to entry is financial, not physical. And for families without wealth, the gamble is existential. At 15, Thiem was already carrying a psychological fracture, not from losing, from owing. Every time he stepped on court, he was reminded of what was at stake. His grandmother's apartment, the investors, money, his parents, belief. Failure wasn't just disappointing, it was catastrophic. But something else was forming inside him. Not fear, something sharper. He developed a playing style built on raw aggression, a one-handed backhand in an era dominated by two-handed stability. A forehand with so much wrist snap, it looked like a whip cracking through the air. Power, unrelenting power. It wasn't elegant, it was survival. By 2015, he had won his first 3 ATP titles. By 2016, he reached his first Grand Slam semi-final at Roland Garros. He cracked the top 10. He won titles on 3 different surfaces in the same year. He was no longer just a clay court specialist. He was becoming something dangerous. But the mental architecture remained the same. Every match was a payment. Every victory was a debt reduced. Every loss was a reminder of what he still owed. And then the pressure intensified. In 2018, he reached his first Grand Slam final, Roland Garros, the cathedral of clay. His opponent, Rafael Nadal. Thiem lost in straight sets. It wasn't close, but something shifted in him that day. Not defeat, clarity. He realized that being good wasn't enough. Being powerful wasn't enough. To win a Grand Slam in the era of Federer, Nadal and Djokovic, he had to become something more, and that's exactly what he did. In 2019, Dominic Thiem hired Nicolas Massou, a Chilean coach, former Olympic champion. Known for his fire, the partnership was immediate. Massou didn't just refine Thiem's technique, he unlocked something psychological. The European discipline met South American passion, and it worked. Thiem began flattening his shots, coming to the net more, using the slice strategically. He was no longer just a baseline grinder, he was a complete player. And then, the breakthrough. Indian Wells. Hard courts. His first Masters 1000 title, and his opponent in the final, Roger Federer. He didn't just win, he dominated. For the first time, the tennis world had to acknowledge something uncomfortable. Dominic Thiem wasn't just good, he was a threat to the big three. He became one of only two players, alongside Djokovic, to defeat Rafael Nadal 4 or more times on clay. At the 2019 ATP Finals, he beat Roger Federer and Novak Djokovic in consecutive matches, but there was a pattern emerging. One that Thiem couldn't escape. Roland Garros 2019. Another final. Against Nadal. Again. He lost Australian Open 2020. His first hard-court Grand Slam final. Against Djokovic. He was up 2-1, serving for the match. And he lost 3 Grand Slam finals. 3 defeats. The mental fracture was deepening, not from lack of skill, from proximity. He was close enough to taste it, but never close enough to hold it. And then 2020 arrived. The pandemic changed everything. Tennis returned in August. The US Open was played in a bubble. No crowds, no energy, just silence. And in that silence, Dominic Thiem found something. Not peace, desperation. He knew this might be his last chance. The final was surreal. No crowd noise. No roar of energy, just the sound of the ball and the grunts of 2 men destroying themselves. Thiem lost the first set 2-6, then the second 4-6. He was 2 sets down in a Grand Slam final. Again. Inside his mind, the war was raging. Shit, you're not going to make it again. What's wrong with you? His own voice, his worst enemy. But something broke in that moment, not his spirit, his fear. He stopped thinking. He stopped calculating. He just fought. Third set, 6-4, fourth set, 6-3, fifth set. Zverev served for the match. Thiem broke him. Thiem served for the match. Zverev broke him back. Tiebreak. At 6-4 in the tiebreak, Thiem had 2 match points. His hand was shaking. He hit a forehand long, then another. 6-6, but Zverev cracked first, a double fault, then an error, 7-6 in the tiebreak. Dominic Thiem had won, after 4 hours and 2 minutes, after 3 previous final defeats, after years of sacrifice, debt and pressure. He had finally done it, and he felt nothing. 3 weeks later, in an interview, he admitted it. I fell into a hole, a mental hole. The depression came fast. Not from losing, from winning. He had spent his entire life chasing this moment, and when it arrived, it didn't fix anything. The debt was still there, the pressure was still there, the weight was still there. Victory didn't erase the cost. He tried to keep going. 2021 arrived, but something else was breaking inside him, not mentally, physically. Before Wimbledon 2021, he withdrew. The diagnosis: detachment of the posterior sheath on the ulnar side of his right wrist. The same wrist that had generated all that power, the same wrist that had carried him to the top. It had finally given up. 5 weeks in a splint, surgery, rehabilitation. But it wasn't just a physical injury. It was the culmination of years of biomechanical stress. His forehand, the whip-like motion, the extreme wrist snap, had been destroying his body from the inside. The Western grip, the topspin, the power, it had made him a champion, and it had broken him. The price of everything had finally been paid. Recovery is quiet. There are no crowds, no applause, just repetition and pain. He tried to come back. 2022, 2023. But the wrist never fully healed. Not the way it needed to. The power was gone. He could still play, but he couldn't dominate. And for someone like Thiem, that was the same as not playing at all. The realization came slowly, not in a single moment, but in 1,000 small ones. Every time he hit a forehand and felt the twinge in his wrist. Every time he lost to players he would have destroyed in his prime. Every time he looked at the ranking and saw his name dropping. His body had betrayed him, not out of weakness, out of overuse. The same technique that made him elite had demanded too much, and the body always collects its debt. But something else was happening, something quieter. Away from tennis, Thiem had begun building something new, not a comeback, a future. He founded Thiem Energy, a company focused on making clean energy accessible to younger generations. He'd always been conscious of legacy, but now he understood that legacy wasn't just about wins and titles. It was about what you leave behind when the competition ends. "I want to contribute to the planet and the community after my tennis career," he said. For the first time in years, he wasn't carrying a debt. He was building something that mattered. The body had limits, but the mind didn't. And the legacy he was building now wouldn't require sacrifice from anyone else. Dominic Thiem's career was never just about tennis. It was about the price of a dream. His grandmother sold her apartment when he was 14. Investors gave him money he'd have to repay. His parents dedicated their lives to his success, and he carried all of it with him, every match, every point, every breath. When he finally won the US Open in 2020, it should have been the moment that justified everything. But it wasn't, because some debts can never be fully repaid. Not with trophies, not with rankings, not with glory. He reached the top of the mountain and found that the view didn't change anything. Then his body broke. The same power that elevated him to the peak destroyed the foundation. And he had to learn the hardest lesson of all, that success and fulfillment are not the same thing. His legacy now is being written differently, not through grand slams, through impact, Thiem energy, environmental activism, mentorship. He's building something that doesn't require his wrist to be intact, something that doesn't carry the weight of someone else's sacrifice. Something that's his. Some athletes chase greatness until their bodies give out. Others learn to redefine what greatness means. Dominic Thiem spent years paying a debt he never asked for. And in the end, the only way to be free was to stop playing the game entirely. Not every victory feels like triumph, and not every ending is a tragedy. If this story stayed with you, I left something in the pinned comment.